It is Monday. It's the 21st of July. You're watching ARIRANG Korea's only global network. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Gun-young. Now, in recent weeks, North Korea has increasingly been flip-flopping. The regime, which has repeatedly proposed putting an end to slandering between the two Koreas, threatened retaliation against Seoul and Washington's criticism over its recent missile testing. And not just this, Pyongyang also sent out mixed signals about its participation at the Incheon Asian Games this fall. First, here's our Choi You-sun.
North Korea's powerful National Defense Commission has given an ultimatum to Seoul and Washington, saying their isolating policies towards Pyongyang will only be met with retaliation. Citing its recent proposals to Seoul that the two sides refrain from slandering each other, the commission said it has done everything possible to improve inter-Korean ties and that the time has come for a final decision. The latest threat comes after Seoul and Washington, as well as the international community, strongly criticized Pyongyang's recent short-range missile tests. North Korea also flip-flopped in regards to its participation at the upcoming Asian Games hosted by the South. Days after walking out of last Thursday's inter-Korean talks on its attendance, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un highlighted cross-border reconciliation and cooperation through the sporting event on Sunday.
Saying the Asian Games will be an important opportunity for the two Koreas to improve ties and alleviate distrust, he added sports are sacred and should not be used as a political bargaining chip for rebellious powers.
Reporting on Kim's observation of the North Korean national football team, Pyongyang's state media added North Korea has decided to send a delegation of athletes to the Incheon Asian Games from September 19th to October 4th. The North's apparent flip-flopping is thought to be its way of pressuring the South to return to negotiations. Choi You-sun, ARIRANG News.
Japan has dispatched an official from its National Security Council to Korea for the first time since the country officially dropped its ban on collective self-defense, which was earlier this month. Now, official at Seoul's foreign ministry says that senior official Takehiro Funakoshi arrived in Seoul on Sunday. Now, he will meet with officials at South Korea's foreign and defense ministries today and tomorrow. Funakoshi is expected to give a detailed explanation of Tokyo's push for collective self-defense and seek Seoul's understanding on the issue. Now, this comes just days after the two countries held nuclear talks and amid rumors of a possible ministerial-level meeting next month. Back here in this country, lawmakers opened a month-long extraordinary session this Monday with one goal above all others: narrowing their differences and passing a bill aimed at determining what exactly caused the Seoul ferry to sink back in April. Here's our Ji Myung-gil.
The ruling Saenuri Party and the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy agreed Monday to relaunch a task force whose sole responsibility will be ironing out a special bill aimed at determining the cause of April's ferry disaster. The legislation calls for the creation of a parliamentary inspection team and outlines measures to provide compensation for the families of the victims, some of whom have been on a hunger strike since last week, demanding that the bill be passed by this Thursday. For that to happen, the nation's two main political parties will first have to resolve their differences. The main opposition party wants a special judicial police officer appointed to the parliamentary inspection team to ensure the effectiveness of the investigation. The ruling party has raised concerns about the idea, saying it could disturb judicial order and the division of powers prescribed by Korea's constitution.
Our party has made new proposals to the ruling party, as it's been saying that appointing the judicial officer disturbs the judicial order, but regardless, a plenary session must open on the 24th.
The proposals given by the main opposition party could affect Korea's judicial order. We must get consent from the people. This is not a matter to be decided by a few.
The ruling party has instead proposed appointing a special prosecutor to conduct investigations at the request of the inspection team. The unified main opposition has accused the ruling party of trying to block passage of the special bill, while the ruling party is blaming the main opposition for playing politics with the issue heading into the July 30th by-elections, where 15 parliamentary seats will be decided. Kim Young-gil, ARIRANG News.
Now, the battle for control at the crash site of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 is entering a new chapter focused on the fate of victims, following reports of bodies being loaded into refrigerated railway carriages by the very people suspected of shooting down that plane. Russian President Vladimir Putin has promised the Dutch Prime Minister that he'll help to retrieve bodies and black boxes from the Ukrainian rebel-held crash site of MH17. But the U.S. and British leaders keep their fingers pointed at Russia for nurturing the separatists suspected of bringing down the airliner. Our Son Jung-in has the latest.
A spokesperson for the Dutch government press service said the latest conversation between Prime Minister Mark Rutte and Russian President Vladimir Putin focused on practical matters, including the handing over of the black boxes that were seen being retrieved from the crash site. The spokesperson said Putin vowed his full cooperation in handling the case, as well as allowing unrestricted access to the site. Prime Minister of self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic Alexander Borodai said they were ready to hand the black box to the International Civil Aviation Organization.
We are keeping the black box in Donetsk. We are waiting for international civil aviation representatives to arrive.
The rebel leader also said the bodies of victims recovered from the crash site would remain in refrigerated containers at a train station in the town of Torres in the meantime. International monitors had reported that the human remains were headed to an unknown site, expressing concerns about their whereabouts. Western leaders are furious about the manhandling of corpses and are urging Putin to take serious actions in helping international rescuers bring the bodies home. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who described the scenes of separatists removing bodies as grotesque, said during an interview with CNN that the U.S. knows with confidence that Ukraine did not have a weapon capable of downing a jet. He added that it was pretty clear a missile system had been transferred from Russia. Meanwhile, an urgent vote led by Australia is expected to take place within the next 24 hours in the UN Security Council on a resolution that would condemn the shooting down of the plane and demand those responsible be held accountable. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
And on to another crisis. The UN Security Council has convened an emergency meeting expressing serious concern over the rising number of civilian fatalities in the Gaza Strip. Now, they're looking at a draft resolution by one of the council members, Jordan, which, among other things, is calling for the withdrawal of Israeli occupying forces and lifting restrictions in and out of Gaza. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry traveled to Cairo early Monday for talks on the ongoing crisis with Egyptian officials who, if you remember, proposed a truce last week that Hamas rejected. In the nearly 2 weeks of violence, more than 500 people have been killed, many of them civilians on the Palestinian side.
When the latest news meets the latest business stories, we give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Business Today with Moon Gon-yong. Every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
Now, at the nation's top office today, the leaders of Korea and Portugal held summit talks where economic cooperation topped the agenda. The presidential office of Cheongwade says the two countries signed 2 memorandums of understanding calling for increased cooperation in the renewable energy and tourism sectors. President Park Geun-hye and Portuguese President Aníbal Cavaco Silva also exchanged views on how to increase bilateral cooperation in trade, investment, and information and communications technology. The summit talks were held on the 3rd and final day of the Portuguese leader's official visit to Seoul. Korea's new finance minister sat down for talks with the chief of the nation's central bank this morning, with both agreeing that there are growing downside risks stemming largely from April's ferry tragedy. But the finance minister made it clear that any decision over the nation's key interest rate falls solely upon the central bank. Our Hwang Ji-hye has this report.
Cooperating to support the Korean economy. That's what the nation's top two economic policymakers agreed upon in their first meeting. Finance Minister Choi You-sun, who took office last week, met with the Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol on Monday. They both shared views that the pace of economic recovery at home is slowing amid downside risks stemming from sluggish domestic demand, largely due to the ferry disaster in April. The two also shared concerns over structural problems within the domestic economy, such as the imbalance between the nation's exports and domestic demand, and the divide between corporate and household income. Based on that understanding, Choi and Lee agreed that it's important to integrate fiscal and monetary policies to tide over the problems at hand. That, however, will be done under one precondition: respecting the unique role of the two different bodies. Finance Minister Choi emphasized that a change in the nation's key interest rate is a decision that the central bank makes independently. The meeting comes amid growing speculation that the appointment of the finance minister, who's widely known to be pro-growth, may exert pressure on the central bank to cut the key rate. While the new finance minister has not directly addressed the need for a cut, his recent remarks point to easing monetary policy to spur growth. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
Well, Korea's 100 billion won club is growing. More than 450 venture firms posted sales of more than 100 billion Korean won. Well, that's roughly $97 million last year. That is more than 9% higher from the total number of companies on that list in 2012, something the Small and Medium Business Administration chalks up to advances in technology and rising exports. The newest entrant into the club includes mobile messaging service, yes, Kakao Talk. The combined sales of the 454 firms on the list came to $98.5 billion. That accounts for more than 7% of Korea's gross domestic production. However, on the other side, the aging of Korea's population raises a number of economic challenges. Chief among them is how to provide for the elderly in their time of greatest need. New OECD data shows that while there are currently more than 5 working-age Koreans supporting every senior citizen, that number will drop to just under 2 by the year 2036. The number has seen a steady decline over the years. Now, back in the 50s, there were about 15 working-age Koreans for every 1 elderly citizen. Currently, only Chile and Mexico have more economically active people supporting every senior among OECD members. But by 2036, only 4 nations will have less people supporting the aged. Now, we should be in the middle of monsoon season right about now in Korea, but it seems things are turning out quite differently this year. Rain has been hard to come by so far this summer, and this so-called what people have been calling dry monsoon is having an effect on the buying habits of Koreans as well. Our Kon Kim explains.
The monsoon period here in Korea, which usually falls from late June to late July, is when the nation receives about 40% of its precipitation for the whole year. But weaker than normal atmospheric pressure from the North Pacific has made for dry conditions so far this summer, and it's had a direct effect on consumer spending.
Rain boots and umbrellas are usually flying off the shelves by now, but not this year.
Our sales have been dominated more by people going on vacation this year. Folding tables and camping-related items have been quite popular.
Sales of leisure or folding tables have jumped the most among all summer products, followed by camping and barbecue gear. It's a sign that consumers are adjusting to the abnormally dry weather conditions. Some 400 millimeters of rain fell on Seoul from July 1st to the 15th last year, while just 23.5 millimeters has fallen this year. As such, fewer people are buying rain boots, umbrellas, and other rain-related products, including dehumidifiers, which have been affected the most among all electric items. The retail industry has also had to adjust its marketing strategies.
Compared to last year, we aren't featuring dehumidifiers or clothing that usually sells well during the monsoon period. We've cut out our coverage of these items by about 20 to 30%.
Instead, they're promoting more vacation-related products, which have enjoyed a sales boom 2 to 3 weeks earlier than normal. Industry insiders say some retail shops have already started focusing on their upcoming fall products, as a monsoon season isn't forecast to be as severe as in years past. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Well, this could be a bit of a good news for those health patients. Now, the virus that causes AIDS was discovered in the early 1980s, and scientists around the world since then have been working on finding a cure. Well, 3 decades later, a team of Korean researchers believes that they have taken one big step at least toward that ultimate goal. Our Shin Se-min has the latest on this breakthrough.
Over 35 million people worldwide are currently infected with HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. There is no cure and there's no vaccine, although Korean researchers believe they may be on the right track toward developing one. A team from Seoul National University says they have discovered an enzyme called SAMHD that breaks up the RNA of the part of virus that contains the infection. They say it leaves open the possibility of completely blocking off the infection in the first place.
The HIV gene is composed of RNA strands, and the SAMHD1 cellular enzyme takes direct aim at the gene and completely restrains the virus from developing.
The team is optimistic that the SAMHD1 enzyme can be developed into an AIDS vaccine over time.
Even if the virus mutates, as it normally does, the newly discovered enzyme will identify the changes, thereby raising the possibility of creating a vaccine.
That would take time, though, up to 10 years to be exact, as the research team is now just wrapping up their basic cell research. The new findings have been published in the medical journal Nature Medicine. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Now, education spending is putting Korean parents in the hot seat. Education expenses have helped push the nation's household debt toward record levels, sapping families' ability to spend money on other goods and leading private consumption to fall and perhaps contributing to sluggish domestic economy ultimately. Well, it's nothing new in this heavily education-driven society, but new numbers suggest it's not getting any better. Dr. Kim Byung-ju joins me live in the studio. So, Dr. Kim, we know that the government has been putting out all these various measures to reduce the gap between schools and also to reduce the incentives for parents to, I suppose, to spend more money on private tutoring and hagwons and things like that to get their children into the best places. Yeah. But obviously that has been working out too well and we have new numbers that back it.
Right, exactly. New numbers that further supports our concern here in Korea, the big concern ever since the 80s, the growing cost for education here in Korea. This is an interesting illustration based upon the data released yesterday by Korea Institute for Industrial Economics and Trade here. Let's consider the starting point. Let's put the income and education spending of households here in Korea at the same level, starting point back in 1990, and see how much they have grown over the years, so about 23 years here. And the red bar you see on the screen here is the education spending. It has grown by 5.9 times as opposed to the household income that had grown 4.5 times. Initially, in 1990, the education spending, average education spending for household was about 49,000 won, as opposed to like their income 938,000 won per month. And now, last year it stood education spending 292,000 won, as opposed to 4.2 million won income here. So this indeed confirms our concern that education spending here in Korea is increasing out of proportion to an unreasonable level, and that has been happening for the last 23 years. This is what number is showing.
Right, just to give you a tip, the graph, 1990 was the standard or the base, I suppose, figure, and then from then 5.9 times and 4.9 times respectively.
How many times there's increased,
right. So this heavy spending is, however, mostly concentrated in a certain age group of parents. Here it says those in their 40s in particular. I suppose those who have children in middle and high schools.
Right, exactly. And middle and high schools, these children face the greatest demand for private education here. Well, let's start with, however, the bar on the on the left-hand side. This is usually the parents who have their children in kindergarten and elementary school. In the kindergarten, in Korea, usually they start with, even before kindergarten, they start with private education for music, like a piano playing, and
sports and English. And
you have a long list. Fine arts, sports and English and all that. And once their children entered elementary school, math added on top of that. And let's move on to the center bar there. What's added on top of that is, the separate private tutoring for Korean language, often writing. Writing is very important for college education. So, non-sol here in Korea is called, and that's added on top of it. And the cost for English and math education, they increase big time for these children, for these students in middle school and high school. And even in some, cases, private education for natural science classes is also added on top of it. That's why you see the tallest bar in the center there for the parents who have their children in middle school and high school here. And right-hand side, you may wonder, okay, what about those parents in their 50s? They would have their children usually in college. Why are they spending? Well, the answer is they continue to spend private education for English, for instance. College students taking their English exam to get them the scores for certified examinations of different
kinds. To land them a good job.
Exactly.
Or a job at all.
TOEICs and well, they actually take private education to land on the job. There are special classes for Samsung aptitude tests, SSAT, and even graduate schools, law school and medical school, private education. So even those older parents, they don't get off the hook in terms of private education spending here. That's what we're seeing on the screen here.
Like very, very interesting. So it's non-stop, really, non-ending story of these parents supporting their kids in the form of private tutoring and things. But then again, I'm sure the amount spent on children's education varies greatly depending on the size of the household income, right?
Right, yeah. Actually, we prepared a number that we have used before about a year ago here. These numbers, let's bring up on the screen here. These numbers were based on year 2012 figures, so slightly outdated, but still the shocking difference, the income level difference among those two groups who are making 3 to 4 million won per month on one hand, and over 6 million won per month. That difference, over like twice as much, that really raises anxiety among Korean parents, because Koreans do strongly believe that education is an important tool of social mobility. So this is one of the causes for Korean anxiety and unhappiness.
Right. I mean, I think there really needs to be some kind of an average amount, at least, for the least amount of private tutoring, if that could be the case.
Exactly.
So do we have any indicators for how the lower income earning families feel about this gap? I'm sure that's, they feel very left out and very anxious.
Right. That feeling coming from the previous illustration we saw may be explained in this next chart right here that you can see. This is income elasticity. What it means is if it's over 1, which is all the cases here, actually the spending on extra education will grow faster than the extra income that's being made. Okay, so basically what it's showing is a lower income class on the left-hand side, they are eager to increase their spending on education if there's an extra income there, and that very high level for the bottom 20% just tells us the level of anxiety among the parents who have lower income, feeling that they're feeling left behind. So if they have extra one, for instance, they'll be more than willing to spend that on education more than anything else. So indeed, it shows really high level anxiety. But then again, all those bars going over one actually shows Koreans all over the board, regardless of your income level, are determined to spend more on education when there is an extra income. So quite a very interesting phenomena that we're observing here.
Well, very interesting indeed. And it seems like for Korean parents, it's middle school and high school, they spend more on their children's education to get them into a good university. And then once they're in, they'll spend more to land them a good job. And I don't know how long that will last. I mean, soon we'll have private tutoring for people to get better promotions at work, if not.
I think it makes sense.
Well, definitely there needs to be something done on this. All right, Dr. Kim Byung-ju, thank you so much.
Thanks.
And that is your business today on this Monday. Thank you for watching. Do join us again at 6 p.m. Korea time on Early Edition at 6.